Hello and happy Tuesday, Sipsters. Welcome back to another episode of the Sippin' on Stories podcast with me, Mandy Corey, your host. I'm so delighted that you're here with me today. I already told you last week what this episode was going to be, but in case you haven't listened to that or you forgot, I'm here to remind you. Over Christmas, I had asked you to write in Christmas memories for a listener submission episode where I didn't have anybody actually on the podcast, but I read those submissions myself, kind of reacted or responded to them in a way. And it was just a different way to get your stories maybe in a shorter form or, just get more people on to share a story that they have had. And I had some submissions and I loved it. I loved reading so many different people's experiences with Christmas. And so I asked if you liked that and if you did, what other listener submissions you might want to hear. And I had somebody say, I always love a good near death experience. And you know what? So do I. So I decided to do another listener submission episode with near death experiences where I asked people to tell me about them. And I did get some responses to that as well. So I'm going to be reading those today and I'm excited. I will say the older that I get, the more anxiety that I have about dying. In fact, I was talking to somebody the other day and I was like, maybe it's time that I don't know if I need to get on something for that. I don't know. I do feel like it's getting maybe not normal. So having an episode where people are telling me their near death experiences is a little bit like, oh boy, hopefully it doesn't make me more scared to drive. I will say there are a lot of car related experiences. Unsurprisingly, there are also a lot that, I appreciated. There was a lot that had a spiritual element to it. And I just thought it was cool because it really does make you reflect a lot of times. I feel like coming close to death can give you a different perspective that maybe you might not have any other day, So I'm just going to say there is a spiritual element to a lot of the stories, and I thought it was really sweet. And so, yeah, I hope you enjoy this episode of Near Death Experiences. We are going to start off with, what do you know? A car experience. So, this one was actually my brother, and I didn't actually know that this had happened when it happened, which is crazy. I was not in the house at the time. I had moved out. And I don't know how I didn't know about it. Anyway, okay. In December of 2009, I was heading from Pocatello to Idaho Falls for a Christmas party with the scout camp where I worked. I'd tried to make this event for years and something always went wrong. Flat tires, broken axles, but this time I finally had a ride with two friends, Corey and Jacob. Corey drove a Ford Explorer that was usually packed with heavy metal choir risers from his high school show choir. Each one weighed a lot, and they normally filled the back of the SUV. But because Jacob decided to come with us at the last minute, Corey had to take all the risers out to make room. At the time, it felt like a small inconvenience. Later, we realized it likely saved our lives. The weather wasn't great, but it didn't seem dangerous. As we drove north, a semi cut us off, forcing us to slow down. We later learned there had been a rollover accident just ahead. After we passed it and began speeding back up, the back tire hit some black ice. The SUV spun completely sideways. I remember looking out my window and seeing straight down the highway. Corey steered us into the grassy median to avoid sliding into farm equipment along the shoulder. The front tire caught and the vehicle began to roll. According to witnesses, we rolled 3 or 4 times, nearly into oncoming traffic, before landing upright in the median. The car was destroyed, but somehow we were alive. First responders were already nearby from the earlier accident and arrived quickly. We were all wearing seatbelts, and they absolutely saved our lives. My injuries were minor, a cut finger and a bruised elbow, considering how violent the crash was. A bystander later said he was shocked anyone survived. I called my mom to come pick us up from the fire station, and when I got home, my sister, not me, by the way, didn't believe me. She thought I was lying about rolling an SUV on the interstate until she talked to my mom. I did finally make it to that Christmas party the following year, but I'll never forget that day, and I'll never stop telling people to wear their seatbelts, how they can literally save your life. Yeah, it's crazy. I did ask him if he had a picture, and he does, and I can put it on to Instagram. It's a pretty terrible picture. It's very blurry because this was back in the day of cell phones not having good camera quality, of course. But yeah, and the choir risers being removed and how that was like, oh, that probably saved our lives was because if those were in the car when it had flipped, for sure that would have done some serious damage to the people inside. He had mentioned that, like, yeah, the roads weren't like crazy, but they kind of had, he said they were called like snake skins, where it kind of looked like the snow was kind of making like snake forms through it. I don't know. It was, driving makes me nervous. Again, the older I get, the more nervous I am to drive. And it's reasons like this, for sure. All right, next one. Okay, to preface this next story, there is mention of a patriarchal blessing in the story. So, a patriarchal blessing in the LDS Church is a special priesthood blessing, a blessing given by a priesthood holder in the church that is available to all the members. And it is a very special blessing given to those people. Like, they normally prepare for it and they fast for a time to prepare themselves for it. And there is like one patriarch in your given area that you go to. And this blessing can provide like kind of sometimes like spiritual guidance or comfort or like things that might come to pass in your life. Um, so it's pretty special in for the people that receive them in the church. So that's mentioned in this next story. I would like to share a sacred experience that changed my life forever and was a fulfilled prophecy / promise that was made when I was 14 years old and I received my patriarchal blessing. Back in February, I went on a much anticipated 3-day backcountry ski vacation with some friends staying in some mountain yurts outside of Sun Valley, Idaho. We used snowmobiles to get us and our gear close to the yurts and shaved off 6 miles to our destination. We had a great time, and on the last day there, I woke up early and went outside to the yurts and sat down on a log to watch the sunrise over the Sawtooth Mountain Range. As I sat there, my mind reflected on God's creations, and a deep sense of gratitude filled my heart. As I watched the orange glow get brighter on the horizon, I pulled out my phone and played my favorite hymn, Come Thou Fount, and enjoyed a sweet moment with Heavenly Father and my Savior in giving thanks for these are lyrics to the song Come Thou Fount. Seeking me when a stranger wandering from the fold of God, He to rescue me from danger interposed His precious blood. Oh, that day when freed from sinning, I shall see Thy lovely face. Come, my Lord, no longer tarry. Take my ransomed soul away. Send thine angels now to carry me to realms of endless day. Here's my heart. Oh, take and seal it. Seal it for thy courts above. Little did I know that these lyrics would take on a whole new meaning for me later that day. As I sat there enjoying this rare, sublime moment, looking at God's creation with the orange on the horizon and the moon and some stars visible right above it, I picked up my phone and FaceTimed my family to say good morning and share with them this moment. Luckily, they were awake and we were able to talk and watch the sunrise together and share this amazing experience. Afterwards, we said our goodbyes and I told them that we would be skiing some more runs for that day and then we would head home. We finished up after having a great time and skied back down to the snowmobiles and headed out. When we made it back to the truck, we first went to unload our packs. I dropped the tailgate of the truck, took off my helmet, and unloaded my heavy pack, and then began to get the trailer ready to load. My friend had one of those V-nose open trailers with the big metal rod in the middle that held up the 2 unloading ramps on each side. The side to the left was still down, so I put it up, and as soon as I had finished pinning it, in an instant I looked up, and my friend, who had gone to start loading the snowmobiles, had somehow gotten the throttle stuck and launched the sled in the air and sailed it all the way over the 15-foot trailer. There was nothing but the unloading ramp between me and this now 700-pound snowmobile flying in the air and coming right down on top of me. I had no time to even react. In an instant, everything went black. I could hear faint sounds, but surprisingly, no pain. I could not tell how long it took, but my friends pulled the snowmobile off of me and sat me up. It was the most peaceful, surreal moment I had ever experienced. I always thought that I would be scared to die when that moment came, but when it was there, I strangely felt at peace. Thoughts raced through my mind of the morning that I had had of giving thanks to God for my wonderful life. I was able to share the morning with my family and say my final farewell, and I was ready to return to my Heavenly Father. And then going back to the song that he had been listening to earlier, "Come, my Lord, no longer tarry. Take my ransomed soul away. Send thine angels now to carry me to realms of endless stay." And just like that, I was gone. As you can tell, I didn't die, thankfully to my wife and family. There was an EMT in the parking lot that witnessed the whole thing and came over to help. He said he had lost my pulse for 15 to 20 seconds, and somehow I awoke right when my pulse came back. They pushed and felt all over my body, asking where there was pain, positively knowing that something was wrong. Surprisingly, both my arms worked, no apparent injuries to my head, chest, or back. They checked my right leg, it moved, and then they went to check my left leg, and it felt very off. They pulled down my pant leg, and there was a mangled, muscly mess on my left thigh. I thought for sure my femur was shattered, but to my surprise, I was able to stand on it. As I stood up next to the truck and looked back on the damage that had just taken place, I noticed the snowmobile had snapped in half the big metal rod that holds the two unloading ramps up, and there was a big concave dent in the tailgate of the truck right where my body was. As I was trying to make sense of how I walked away from this, aside from thinking I may be Superman, my mind was taken to the promise made to me in my patriarchal blessing when I was 14 years old, a promise/prophecy that I had feared for much of my life. I was promised that guardian angels would be sent to watch over me until my missions were complete in this life, and that I would be able to recognize those moments to build my faith in God. I know there is this amazing moment knowing that Heavenly Father really did send angels to protect me, and I was standing in their midst. I was getting definitely teary-eyed. There was a moment there during that story that I thought I was going to have to pause because I was about to start crying, and I knew I probably wouldn't be able to pull it back together to keep reading. And these are those types of moments that I know people experience, and I just am like, they can't deny that experience in their life. That is so extremely powerful and definitely a testimony builder for him. And I'm so grateful that he sent that story in. And I think it's really easy to go through life sometimes and not think of like all these like literally miracles that can happen for people. And then I read a story like this and I just am like, there's nothing else to call that than a miracle. And this was my brother-in-law actually that wrote this in. And I remember when it happened, but I don't remember all of the details of the story. And yeah, I'm just really grateful that it didn't turn out differently for sure. So that was an amazing story. Scary, but amazing. I don't really like, I guess. It reminds me of a time that my husband, he was driving home, again, car. He was driving home and he went to turn at a red light or at a green light, and another car had run a red light and almost hit him. And he said he was going really fast and it would have hit him right in the driver's side. And he said he just turned and he was looking at this car that was about to hit him and he wasn't scared. He just felt peace. And when he told me that, I'm not going to lie, I was a little angry because I was like, no, you should not feel peace when you are about to die and leave me and our children. However, coming from somebody who feels constant anxiety about death, I would hope that that's how I would feel in the moment, is peace rather than the fear. And I just love that in this story, like he had this really amazing experience right before that allowed him to have that peace. So just an amazing, amazing story. Next one. My family was on the way home from a trip, and because of schedules and flights, it ended up that my husband was driving one vehicle with my son, and I was driving my two girls in another vehicle behind them. We were on a busy freeway at night, and I was about 3 minutes behind my husband. My daughter in the passenger seat got a call from my son. He said, "Dad wanted me to call and tell mom to get in the carpool lane right now." I could hear through the phone the urgency in his voice as well as the sound of intense rain hitting their windshield. It was so odd to me because there was no indication of rain whatsoever. It didn't even seem like the air was heavy or cloudy, even though it was dark. It felt as if there was no sense of danger. Because this seemed so weird to me that he would call and demand this, I decided it was something important. So I immediately made my way across the 4 lanes of busy traffic and got into the carpool lane. As soon as I had made it into the lane, the rain hit like a wall, the most intense rain I had ever driven in, and it was heavy and slushy, and cars were hitting this going full 80 miles per hour. Vision was bad, and worse was that cars began sliding everywhere. The cars in the 3 lanes next to me began to spin out of control. One spinning car missed my daughter's side of the car by inches. I quickly realized that the 3 cars spinning would have been right in front of me, and I would have hit them head on if my husband had not called and warned us to get into the farthest left lane. I was able to slow down and safely drive by all the accidents without any harm. I was terribly shaken, but it was an amazing experience because my husband told me that God had prompted him to call and tell me those instructions. It very likely saved our lives as well as those in the other vehicles. When I think of it, I'm still grateful to this day. It was a miracle. Again, for him to have the intense feeling to call her, tell her to go in the other lane, and because of that, she avoided this massive, could have been terrible accident for her. Again, I feel like you can't like dismiss that either. Such an incredible story, and again, so glad it didn't end differently. I hate driving in the rain. I love the rain. I hate driving in the rain. You're going to hear that a lot from me apparently on this podcast today, is me telling you how much I don't like driving sometimes. As a kid, I decided that my mom's sleeping pills looked a lot like candy, so I decided to eat all of them. I'm not sure how my mom found out in time, but she found out I ate them. The only other thing I remember myself is sitting in the hospital bed having to drink what looked, smelled, tasted, felt, etc. like black tar. It was not a very happy experience for me. Later on in my life, my mom told me some more details, though. I guess the doctors had told them there was almost no chance for me to survive. The black drink was more of a, we always do it, so might as well do it, even though the chances of it doing anything are small type of thing. They were basically told I was a goner. So my dad gave me a priesthood blessing. The fact that I'm writing this means the priesthood blessing worked, I guess. Ha, they need to make those things look less yummy. Again, a priesthood blessing going along with the patriarchal blessing is a blessing given by someone in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that holds the priesthood, which is something given to a man. And a lot of people ask for priesthood blessings when really a lot of things, when they are sick, when they're needing help, when you're about to go back to school. There's a lot of different reasons why people might ask for one. But in this case, it was to save his life and for this person, which happens to be my brother. I realized I have a lot of people in my life that have had near-death experiences, and I don't love that. I really don't. If you remember, I had my mom come on as well and have a podcast episode where she talked about all the different times in her life that she feels like she almost died. So I'm grateful I don't have one to add to this list of things. But anyway, crazy. The black tar like drink that he had to drink because he took all my mom's sleeping pills, which I do remember that happening. I mean, not as a kid. I remember hearing the story. And it's crazy. Okay. Which this is my brother that has not been interviewed for the podcast yet. He keeps saying the whole family has been on except for me. And so I said, well, here's your opportunity. So come on, right on in. I know you've got something. And he did. He definitely did. Okay. The next one. Of course, it has driving in it. My two sons, who had just turned 3 and 1 the month before, pulled over for a flat tire and were rear ended by a semi driver who wasn't paying attention. We were dragged along by his trailers, spinning, and our car was incredibly damaged. The police, witnesses, first responders all thought we would be dead. I lost consciousness while they took my children to 2 separate hospitals and me to a third. My oldest had a traumatic brain injury, skull fractures, and CSF leaking from his ear. My younger son, whose side took the direct hit from the semi, only got a fractured ankle. Wow. Before we pulled over, I called my husband to ask if there was a spare tire in the car. So he heard our car get hit, the cries of our children, and while I can't remember this, he said I would come to several times just to ask what had happened and if the kids were okay, and then lose consciousness again. He knew approximately where we were and what I had told him. He jumped in his car and drove the freeway until he located us, then drove back roads until he could park. He jumped fences and a ditch, and I was there when I came to, holding our 13-month-old. It was the worst nightmare come to life. While in the hospital, they discovered I had an incredibly rare brain tumor near the new memory center of my brain. I was terrified that I wouldn't have the ability to create new memories with my husband and kids, or worse, that I wouldn't make it through the surgery. It was fully resected, and I didn't/don't have any issues other than monitoring every 6 months. Whoa. That is crazy because, I don't know if this tumor was like cancerous or like, I don't know, but the fact that this terrible traumatic experience had to happen in order for you to find that, it's almost like, are you grateful for the car accident? Or no, like probably not, but at the same time, what would have happened if you hadn't had to go to the hospital? And thankfully, from what it sounds like, everybody turned out to be like everybody was okay. Otherwise, I might also feel very differently about this story and this experience, but that is crazy. And I cannot imagine being the husband on the phone listening to this all take place. Oh my gosh, that would be terrifying. Good for him for doing all that he had to do to get there. Whoa. Okay. Next one. My bio mom has a lot of mental health problems. She was on the heavier side as well, so her medication had to be a super high dose to even touch her. When I was still in her custody, I was around 7 years old, and I went to her asking for something to help with my headache, like Tylenol or ibuprofen. I didn't know she was in a psychosis state, and she ended up giving me too many of her antidepressants, and I overdosed. I remember being stuck in a halfway spot where I could hear and feel my grandma trying to smack me back awake. But the most vivid part was a woman appearing with a warm yellow light around her. I remember she reminded me of a sunflower. She reached out and told me not to be scared, that it wasn't my time, and that she was going to sit with me till I was ready to go back to my body. She was nothing but happiness and warmth. I felt so at peace for what was to come. Next, I remember waking up in the hospital after having my stomach pumped. Fast forward a couple years, and I'm going through my grandpa's photo albums, and I see the sunflower woman. It was his grandma. I had never seen those photos before, so when I saw her, I got goosebumps and asked who she was. And then I told him that was the woman I saw before waking up in the hospital. My grandpa believed she's my guardian angel. I have a special love for sunflowers now. That story literally gives me goosebumps. And again, I'm tearing up on the side of the mic because what an incredible experience. I think, or I feel like I hear of those things happening and you're like, do they really happen? But I 100% believe this. And how do you explain that? How do you explain that other than that you've seen this picture? I don't know. That is wild. I feel like I would have this need for a sunflower tattoo somewhere or something, or I'd have sunflowers probably all through my house. I feel like sunflowers would become so very special to me. I love that story. And again, it was another overdose story as a young child, which, oh my gosh, that's scary. Oh, thank you for submitting that, whoever that was. I don't know who it was, but that was beautiful. All right. Next one. How near I almost hit a moose once and my life definitely flashed past my eyes. Pure miracle I didn't hit it, but maybe the moose would have died. Super scary though. Again, in the car, yes. So scary. I remember my best friend in high school got hit by a deer once and like had this big dent in her car. And some people were like, I don't believe you that a deer hit you. I think you probably hit the deer. And it was like, no, the deer hit her truck. And ever since then, if I am somewhere that's like dark and I know there will be animals, like have my eyes peeled because I'm like, I know an animal is going to run into me. My husband almost got hit by one when he was driving once too. And I mean, I know this story is like I almost hit a moose, but yeah, that would be scary. I'm even scared just to hit like a squirrel running across the street. And that wouldn't like completely make a bad accident. Anyway. All right, next. I was driving in a convoy in southern Afghanistan and I got blown up. This was one of 13 times. So this was my cousin who submitted this story, Christian. And I feel like I want some more detail because I hear that, or not hear, I read that, and I'm instantly like, what happened? Like, was this super terrifying? You said it was one of 13 times. So I'm definitely curious if this was like the 13th time, if you're just kind of used to it at this point. Like, did anybody get hurt? How traumatizing. I cannot imagine what that would be like. And I'm so grateful for people like my cousin who were out doing this, trying to serve the country. And I'm grateful that he lived to tell about it. But seriously, so scary and intense. And again, I'm like, what were the other 13 times? Oh my gosh. Okay. All right, I had one more. And this was a short one. I shattered my femur 3 years ago and was 2 millimeters from the carotid artery. Isn't it so easy to play the what if game? Like, yeah, what if it had gone 2 millimeters a little more to the right or a little more to the left, like whichever direction? That's so scary and to think about. And there are just so many things in life that really you could play the what if game about and things could have turned out so much differently. So with that person, grateful that it did not. Grateful in all these submissions, they were all near death experiences, obviously, or they wouldn't be here to tell about it. But again, I'm so glad that I don't have anything to contribute, even though like as I was thinking about this, like as I was reading them and saying like, oh, my family like all has one and I don't have one. I did think like one of my reason for, we're just having therapy session here on the podcast, but one of my reasons for having a constant anxiety of death is the fact that I have type 1 diabetes, which I have talked about in my episode where I share what it was like being diagnosed with diabetes with somebody else who was diagnosed with diabetes and how there is a real fear and an actual reality that I could die any given day and it can just like come out of nowhere. And I hate that it's a fear that I live with. And sometimes it's like, it's almost funny to say sometimes like, oh, like I just need to eat these Skittles and I won't die, or well, I'll just drink this apple juice and that will keep me from not dying. But like in reality, like it truly does. And if I make one error, like a few weeks ago, I don't know what had happened, but I'd actually accidentally given myself a crap ton of insulin thinking that I was doing something else and I was distracted and thankfully my husband was home and so it didn't cause me to go to a pure panic state a little bit, but I was like, if that happens and I don't realize, like it is very dangerous and having kids it just adds a whole new level of anxiety with that. And so technically I have near death experiences all the time with my low blood sugars, but that's just part of life every day. And I've not landed in the hospital yet with it. So Anyway, hope you enjoyed this. Hope it didn't give you too much anxiety about driving in a car or really anything else, I guess. I know I told you last week, like, what you had to prepare for this upcoming week's episode. And again, I normally don't do that. I'm always just like, be here next week. And most of the time, I do know what's coming, but I'm going to give you a little idea as to what's coming next week again. So, while this episode was a near death experience, and I almost ended up actually just looping both into one, but I decided to separate them. Next week is going to be an actual death experience. Our guest died, did not have a heartbeat for quite some time, and came back to life. And she talks about what that whole situation was and an experience that she had in the time that she was declared dead. So she will be on the podcast with us next week. So stay tuned for that. Thank you all for being here. I say it every week. I love you. I appreciate you. You can find me on Instagram, Sippin' on Stories Podcast. If you want to be on the podcast, if you have your own story, reach out to me there. Come just talk with me over on Instagram. I love it. I love interacting with you. Anyway, if you are not yet subscribing to the podcast, following the podcast, whether you're on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you are, leave a comment, like it, whatever. I always appreciate it. Love you guys. See you here next week for another episode of the Sippin' on Stories podcast. Bye, Sipsters.